What exactly do high zenith pills do? Surely it must have some extraordinary effects, considering how desperate Luo Qinghai and the others were to get their hands on these pills. Han Li suddenly asked through voice transmission. High zenith pills are extremely sought after among all golden immortals, but they're just as rare as they are revered, Taoist Huyan explained. Could it be that it has something to do with making a breakthrough to the high zenith stage? Han Li asked. That's right. The most important effect of the high zenith pill is that it can help cultivators at the pinnacle of the golden immortal stage ward off the fifth decay, Taoist Huyan confirmed with a nod. I see. Han Li was ecstatic to hear this. Given Taoist Huyan's explanation, it was clear that high zenith pills to golden immortals were no less important than golden soul pills to true immortals, and they were clearly even more precious. Furthermore, he had managed to obtain the most premium high zenith pill from that entire cauldron, and that was a massive reward to claim. Taoist Huyan stowed away Ouyang Kuishan's body, then flew toward the remaining halberd-wielding puppet with Yun Ni. Meanwhile, Han Li took a brief moment to inspect his own internal condition, then tightened his grip around his azure bamboo cloud-swarm sword as he exchanged a glance with Worm 3, indicating for her to prepare to strike. Right at his moment, a burst of dull rumbling rang out from the golden chair, causing the entire palace to tremble violently. Even though the palace had already collapsed, the chair remained completely unscathed. All of a sudden, the living corpse seated on the chair rose to its feet, and its entire body was giving off radiant gray light. The golden light barrier seemed to have sensed something, and it also began to glow radiantly, while countless palm-sized golden runes emerged within it. However, that still wasn't enough for it to contain the gray light, and before long, thin cracks were beginning to appear on its surface. A burst of elated laughter rang out from within the golden light barrier, and it wasn't very loud, but everyone who heard it was struck by a burst of sharp pain in the head, as if there were countless red-hot needles piercing into their souls. Everyone hurriedly channeled their cultivation arts to protect their souls, as they darted back in retreat with alarmed looks on their faces. Han Li also flew back in retreat like everyone else, while Gong Shuju cast a bewildered gaze toward the golden chair. Shui Ying flew over to Gong Shuju's side, then also cast her gaze in the same direction. Inside the light barrier, gray light was churning incessantly, and 9 bursts of gray light that resembled plume of smoke surged out of the light barrier before wrapping themselves around the 9 golden stone pillars, then snapped them with ease. The golden light barrier immediately began to tremble violently as the cracks on its surface widened, following which it exploded with a resounding boom. A figure slowly emerged from the vast expanse of golden light, and it was none other than the middle-aged Taoist priest seated on the golden chair. The Taoist priest wore a faint smile as he walked along with his hands clasped behind his back, and he appeared no different from a normal cultivator. The only remarkable thing about him was that his eyes were entirely gray in color with no whites at all, presenting a rather unsettling sight to behold. A hint of surprise and befuddlement immediately appeared on Gong Shuju's face at the sight of the Taoist priest, while Shui Ying asked, "Do you recognize this man, Uncle Gongshu?" "I certainly wasn't expecting to find a gray immortal here. Looks like I really am in luck," Gong Shuju mused as he stared intently at the middle-aged Taoist priest like a hawk. The expressions on the faces of Luo Qinghai and the others all changed drastically upon hearing this, and he immediately swept a sleeve through the air, releasing a burst of blue light that swept up all of the vast Flow Palace cultivators before flying away into the distance. The remaining Tao Lord of the Blaze Dragon Tao also hurriedly flew back to open up some distance between himself and the Taoist priest. While Taoist Huyan and Yun Ni exchanged a glance before doing the same, Han Li didn't know why everyone was so wary of the Taoist priest, but he also decided that it was best to maintain his distance, flying over to Taoist Huyan's side as he asked through voice transmission, "What is a gray immortal? Fellow Taoist Huyan?" The soul fragment had told him some things about gray immortals and the gray realm, but he hadn't gone into much detail, and it seemed that everyone was quite fearful of this gray immortal. "You may not have heard about this, fellow Taoist Li, But once upon a time, our northern glacial immortal realm was actually called the Infernal Frost Immortal Region. The entire immortal region was split into two, following a major battle, and that was during the invasion of the Grey Immortals. Grey Immortals are sworn enemies of us immortals, and we don't know exactly where they come from, but it's said that they can devour immortals. During that battle, all of the sects and powers in the entirety of the Infernal Frost Immortal region joined forces while also recruiting some reinforcements from other immortal regions, and it was only with their combined powers that they were able to force the Grey Immortals into retreat. However, close to half of all of the immortal region's sects were wiped out, and many races were eradicated altogether. Ever since then, no other Grey Immortals have appeared in this immortal region, Taoist Hu Yan informed. Why is it that I've never heard of any of this before? Han Li asked with a stunned expression. The battle that I mentioned took place a very long time ago, and the Heavenly Court has always intentionally tried to conceal those past events, so only some of the top sects in the Northern Glacial Immortal region, such as the Blaze Dragon Dao and the Vast Flow Palace, are aware of these events. You're still quite young, and you were only in the Blaze Dragon Dao for a very short time, so it's no surprise that you haven't heard about any of this, Taoist Hu Yan explained. What Taoist Hu Yan had just said matched what the soul fragment had described, and with that, Han Li was able to confirm that the soul fragment had been telling the truth, at least in this regard. Right at this moment, a streak of red light descended beside the middle-aged Taoist priest, then faded to reveal Worm 3, who extended a slight bow toward him. Welcome back to the immortal realm, Taoist Master Mo Yu. Luo Qinghai and the others were all quite alarmed to see this, clearly not expecting Worm 3 to be familiar with this gray immortal. Meanwhile, Han Li was also looking at the middle-aged Taoist priest with a hint of surprise in his eyes. He had already heard from the soul fragment that the Reincarnation Palace had worked with gray immortals in the past, so he wasn't that surprised to see that Worm 3 had ties with this gray immortal. But this didn't match the story that the soul fragment had told him. According to the soul fragment, Mo Yu was the name of the high zenith stage gray immortal that had triggered the gray immortal invasion of the northern glacial immortal realm, but it had also told him that Mo Yu was a female disciple under the infernal frost immortal lord, while this gray immortal was clearly a man. So what exactly was the truth? Before Han Li had a chance to ponder this matter any further, Gong Shuju suddenly exclaimed, "So you're Mo Yu. I had heard that you had gone missing in the wake of that battle all those years ago. Is this where you've been hiding this entire time?" The middle-aged Taoist priest paid no heed to Gong Shuju as he turned to Worm 3 and said, "Oh, I'm surprised there's still someone who remembers me. Who are you?" "I am Worm 3 of the Reincarnation Palace," Worm 3 replied. Red light flashed over her body as she spoke, and in the blink of an eye, she transformed into a beautiful woman in a red dress, but her face was concealed behind a crimson dragon mask. "Worm 3, is it? I suppose I owe you a favor now. Who do you want to kill?" Mo Yu asked as he swept his gaze over his surroundings. Worm 3 offered no reply to this, merely pointing a finger in Gong Shuju's direction before flying away to the side. Mo Yu turned his gaze to Gong Shuju with a faint smile, but he then suddenly turned his attention to Han Li. "You're in a real sorry state, kid. You're bringing shame upon the laws of time. I'll chat with you after I've returned this favor." Mo Yu chuckled, and everyone else present immediately turned to Han Li with peculiar looks in their eyes upon hearing this. "How are you related to this gray immortal, fellow Taoist Li?" Taoist Hu Yan asked through voice transmission. "That's a bit of a long story. I encountered that soul fragment of his in an underground palace, and I brought it with me after I left. At this point, I still don't know whether he's friend or foe," Han Li replied with a wry smile. "Could it be that you really did enter the legendary Moonlight Palace?" Taoist Hu Yan exclaimed with wide eyes. "It looks like that must have been it," Han Li replied. Meanwhile, Mo Yu's gaze returned to Gong Shuju, and he sighed in a resigned manner. "I'm not someone who likes to owe favors to other people, so I'm afraid you're going to have to die here." "How would you like to die?" "How laughable. Your soul has only just been restored. and your cultivation base is still unsteady. You're just bluffing to try and buy time for yourself." Gongshu harumphed coldly as he made a hand seal, and 10 misty white figures emerged in front of him, each of which was several times larger than the ones from before, and all of them pounced at Mo Yu at once. "Oh crap, you got me." "I didn't think you'd see through me so quickly. Are all immortal envoys this smart nowadays?" Mo Yu exclaimed as feigned a panicked expression, only to then blast a streak of gray light out of the palm of his hand as he declared, "One attack is all I'll need to kill you." As soon as his voice trailed off, the streak of gray light exploded into countless gray threads, all of which were flying through the air at an incredible speed, before piercing through the bodies of the misty white figures in the blink of an eye. All 10 of the misty figures were instantly rooted to the spot, then exploded into a vast expanse of white mist, much to the surprise and incredulity of Han Li and the others. Those misty figures had caused them no shortage of trouble earlier, yet this gray immortal had just eradicated 10 of them in the blink of an eye. After piercing through the misty figures, the gray threads continued to hurtle directly toward Gongshu, who remained completely unfazed as he opened his mouth to release a ball of white light, which transformed into an antiquated white mirror. The antiquated mirror released a burst of white light that was filled with countless runes, and it formed a thick white cocoon of light around his entire body. Mo Yu immediately switched to a different hand seal upon seeing this, and all of the threads of gray light converged toward a single spot, forming a thick gray arrow in the blink of an eye. A formidable glacial aura was emanating from the arrow, and it was different from any type of law power, but was also not inferior to any of them. A series of gray corkscrews of light also appeared around the arrow, and they began to revolve rapidly while giving off a terrifying screeching sound.